Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today, I am very pleased to be sharing with you a replay from one of our recent speaker series. This is a talk from Alexandra Transtrom, who you've gotten to know recently. She came on and did a talk on Venus and Saturn last week. You're going to be seeing a talk that she did, I should say, on counseling skills in astrology. She is a therapist and an astrologer and has a lot to say on basic counseling skills that we can utilize when sharing astrology with other people or reading people's charts. I think you guys will find this very interesting. It's also a way for me to showcase the speaker series, which we are in the midst of right now as well. And I realize that there's a lot of people who may not know about it. So I thought this would be a good thing to do while I was away, a little bit of filler content while I'm gone. And I will be back tomorrow with an episode on the moon in Cancer. And then on Friday, I'll be back with April's astrology. And then we're back into our normal rhythm again. So I appreciate you guys being open to some guests teaching and talking while I'm on a little family vacation. So, on that note, as always, before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections. Transcripts of any of the daily talks are always on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I want to show you where you can learn more about these speaker series by taking you over to the website real quick. If you go to the website, you'll see under the events tab, speaker series. You scroll down, this weekend, Jolly Knot is the last of our spring speakers giving a talk on the lot of fortune. And that is going to be another really fascinating talk on a topic in ancient astrology. You can see the other speakers that have been through already. So every quarter we have new speakers. You can check them out. They're free. Thanks to the success of the Kickstarter, we host the speaker series for free year round. 3 speakers per quarter, 12 on the year. So anyway, check that out. The other thing I want to point you to, if you go to the live talks page, you'll see my monthly webinars. Uranus in Love will be happening on April 18th. You can register for that. If you can't attend live, we send you the recording link later. That is April 18th. We're just before Jupiter and Uranus get together. We're going to be looking at the signature of Uranus and its presence in love, sex, and relationships. The other thing I'm promoting is Ashley's Herbal Apprenticeship Program, which you can learn more about at skyhouseherbs.com. Click under the courses tab. The first year course, the Herbal Apprenticeship, starts on April 24th. And if you stick around at the end of today's talk afterward, you will see an interview that I did with Ashley. That program also features need-based tuition and early bird pricing. Take advantage of those things if they are useful to you. So anyway, on that note, I hope that you will really enjoy today's replay of Alexandra Transtrom's talk on counseling in astrology. Take it easy.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I can't see everybody, so I'm looking at the participants number down here, and it says that there's 77 people here right now, which is pretty cool. So hi. I'm going to pull up my presentation because if I start introducing myself, I'll just ramble without pulling it up. So give me one moment here. Okay, it's going to start at like the middle of my presentation. Hang on. Let me... Okay. So we should be on the front page here. Let me just do this. Right. Okay. We are in business. So I am Alex. Hi, everyone. Again, lovely Sunday. I'm in Rhode Island, so I'm on the East Coast. It's 10:30 here. It's super sunny out, which is great. So my talk is counseling skills in astrological practice. I subtitled it Compassion-Focused Strategies to Help Astrologers Hold Space for the Person Who Lives the Chart. I think that I'm super excited and super passionate about this topic. I mean, I know that I am. Like Saffron had mentioned, I am a licensed mental health therapist and a practicing astrologer. The astrology thing is newer for me. I've been practicing reading charts for probably only reading charts for like 8 months or so, but I have been studying since 2020. I first got my chart read in 2020 and I got bit by the bug like most of us do. So I just kind of deepened my practice from there. And I am a year 2 Nightlight student right now. I took year 1 last year and I'm in the middle of year 2 right now. And I am just super, super grateful that Nightlight exists in general. They offer so many wonderful things. And I'm also super grateful that they had me host this speakers series. So thank you to everyone at Nightlight, and thank you all for being here. Um, yeah, so I have been a therapist for probably like 5 years, I think. And my style of therapy, it actually feels super weird to not be talking to like anyone. But my style of therapy is very insight oriented and process oriented. And let me just grab a drink of water real quick. um, what that means is that I'm not really a solution focused therapist, so I'm not helping people just get over their symptoms. Um, a lot of time, and which is super helpful for a lot of people. A lot of people are like, okay, I'm experiencing intense anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, and I need some coping skills to be able to move through this and live my life. And that's great. And I do a lot of that too. But I think my focus as a therapist more is helping the client turn inward, helping the client sit with what's coming up for them, and helping them really connect to their soul. I see a lot, or the philosophy that I kind of use in my therapy practice is that we have to move towards the pain and we have to move towards the struggle, because I think the pain and the struggle um, really, it does connect us to the soul. And when we can sit with those kind of things, I think we can see what's just beyond the pain, which is an incredible amount of strength and resilience and intuition. And that's just kind of my jam. I like to help people be able to sit with hard things and to be able to access their own strength to get through what it is that they're getting through. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, like, this is who I am and this is the kind of work that I do. Um, so the purpose and relevance of this topic, um, I'm gonna go through a common path that I think I definitely experience, and I think a lot of astrologers probably experience this too. So this is kind of how it worked for me. I got a chart reading, like I said, in 2020, and I got bit by the bug. I was like, holy cow, how is this person who doesn't know me at all telling me about my life, but not just like events in my life, but more like how I experience life. So after I had that reading, I started doing, actually before professional training, I started just kind of teaching myself a little bit about astrology. I bought all the astrology books. I tried to study astronomy. I tried to learn it all. And then I got a mentor and started professional training. Then I enrolled in the Nightlight School. And as astrologers on this path, we really start to deepen our understanding of how profound astrology is when we work with a teacher. The more and more we grasp it, the more and more, A, it gets a little bit confusing, but B, we start to understand that, like, wow, this is an incredibly spiritually like beneficial language that can help so many people. And that's just what happens is we get mesmerized by this like image of the soul. We start to get really excited about what this can do for people. If you guys out there are helpers and healers and empaths and intuitive people, you probably felt this. Like, I can't just keep this for myself. I have to share this language with other people. And so then we start going with friends and we start doing readings for friends and family. They either think it's really cool or really not cool, but we kind of dip our little toes in. And then once we muster up the confidence, or someone just kind of like pushes us out there, we start to put ourselves out there and offer readings for the general public. And this is so exciting and such like a cool part of an astrologer's development. But I think very, very quickly we go from like, yay, I'm so excited to share this knowledge, to like, oh no, I don't know if I can do this with like another person sitting in front of me. There's just so many variables at play when we are sitting face to face with another human being. So I think this topic is super, super helpful. and very relevant for astrologers because we're not just interpreting symbols and regurgitating some sort of archetypal knowledge that we acquired from a book or from class or something like that. Um, I think that that in itself is very difficult, to interpret the symbols and to connect to certain archetypes and be able to articulate that. But then when we have a person in front of us, a person who has had a whole life and who has their own personality and their own set of values and beliefs and way of looking at the world, it becomes very complex. Um, so, so again, that's why I think that we are all here right now. And my hopes for this talk is to, let me tell you, oh, hang on, is that I hope that you leave today with a solid foundation and that you feel validated, you feel confident, and humbly empowered in your role as an astrologer. Some things that I'm going to talk about today, I'm assuming that many of you guys are already doing this. So that's why I hope that you feel validated and just more confident in that, yes, you are on the right track. No, it's not easy, but you're doing what you can to sit with the soul in front of you. And I also obviously hope that you guys learn something and take something away and feel even more confident in your role as an astrologer working with clients. There's kind of a lot in this presentation. Hopefully it's not like too much, but what I'll say to that is that I just want you guys to take what is speaking to you, take what resonates with you, and just leave what doesn't. You're not going to remember every single thing, and you're not supposed to. You're only supposed to remember what stands out to you. Some of the things I talk about, like I'm going to give a very specific, way of doing things, but that's just because I want to bring in like the counseling skills, but also just know that a lot of this can be very flexible. And I hope to kind of talk about that throughout. I was going to say throughout the session, throughout the talk. So this is, let me just move this. Okay. This is the overview of today's talk. So we're going to walk through the flow of a reading. So, well, we'll get into it, but I'm going to walk through the flow of a reading from a counselor's perspective. So we're going to define what counseling skills are, and we're going to explore astrologer-client dynamics. We're going to talk about the roles and responsibilities of you, the astrologer. We're going to talk about the importance of knowing thyself and self-awareness. We're also going to talk about preparing for a reading, making the initial contact with a client, and skills to help navigate the reading. So basic listening and communication skills. In there, we're going to talk about how to talk about hard things with clients. And then lastly, we're going to go over some self-care tips and the importance of boundaries. So I hope we are all feeling excited. And I just want to take a couple minutes to just kind of ground ourselves into this talk right now. So if you don't mind, before I get started, if we can all just kind of center ourselves, get really comfortable, close your eyes if you want to, and just take, 2 or 3 deep breaths. And just take a moment to thank yourselves for being here and taking the time to do this for yourself and for your future clients. Okay, let's get into it. Oh, I'm having a glitch situation. Hmm. Weird. Okay, hang on, guys. I'm having technical difficulties. Oh, lovely Canva. Hmm. So sorry. It seems that my screen is frozen, so I'm just gonna stop my video real quick and see what I can do here. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Hmm. Wow. It is just not working. All right, give me like 2 more minutes.
Do you need to press the present button at the top right hand corner, Alex?
Yeah, it won't even let me click it for some reason, which is really interesting.
You know the best policy is turn it off and turn it on again.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can you still see my screen?
I can see the screen, but yeah, you've
Oh,
got everything on it.
okay. I'm gonna.
Maybe come out the screen share for a second, then try it
Okay.
that way.
All right. Hang on.
It's all right, don't panic.
Thank you.
These things happen. It happens to everybody.
Okay. I appreciate that. All right. Close that down. I
I
also
would
have to.
sing a song, but then that would put everybody off. You'd lose all of your followers.
No worries. Yeah, you don't want to hear me sing either. I also have like a backup computer if we really need to. Um, all right, it's letting me click, which is good. Okay, let's try this again.
Someone's suggesting try sharing Canva. I've never used Canva to present, so I can't offer you any tips on that one.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Let's see if it moves. Okay. I think we got it. Saffron, can you see the defining counseling skills slide?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay. All right. Everyone, I appreciate you and your patience. We are back in business and I hope it doesn't happen again. Okay. Well, now that we've taken an extra minute to get grounded and then ungrounded again. So defining counseling skills. So this is my definition that I made up. And counseling skills are basic skills that are rooted in the field of helping professions such as therapists, spiritual advisors, coaches, etc. And these skills support a professional in the art of effectively holding space and supporting someone who's seeking guidance. Counseling skills are very different, well, not very different, but they're different than like psychotherapy skills. Psychotherapy, I would say, includes specific techniques derived from a variety of schools of thought that are used to process trauma, reduce suffering, and or address symptoms. So psychotherapy is, a very specific you use very specific skills, but at the bottom of psychotherapy are basic counseling skills. Counseling skills are, like I said, like they just kind of help someone effectively hold space. And it's really like, skills that help us convey empathy. They are listening skills, how to appropriately listen, and how to articulate and navigate things around like emotions and people's inner worlds and things like that. So, oh no. Oh, here we go. Good. So I love this image because I think that kind of what I was just saying is that counseling skills are the roots for psychotherapy and the roots for astrology readings. So, there are a lot of overlapping principles that go into like between therapy and astrology, which is really cool. And as I got into astrology, I was like, oh my gosh, like these two worlds overlap so, so much. And so in both settings, we are striving to meet a person with non-judgment, compassion, and empathy. We are striving to have respect for someone's character, their beliefs, their values, their experiences, and their boundaries. So by that I mean, we're not here to get someone to like change the way that they view things or, challenge beliefs or values or anything like that. We're here to honor exactly where they're at with their own beliefs and values. And have respect for where they are and who they are. So I'll talk about this in a little bit, but it is really important to kind of take ourselves and put ourselves aside and really just meet the person who's coming in exactly where they're at. And we don't want to judge who they are or their experiences. And we always want to convey compassion and empathy, like I said before. And then lastly, in both settings, it's really important to cultivate and create a safe environment that can hold a lot of space for self-exploration and understanding. You guys probably all know that people come for astrology readings and therapy, for so many different reasons. But I think at the end of the day, people are just trying to navigate their inner worlds. People are just trying to make sense of who they are and their place in the world, in their relationships, and how to kind of like bring out more self energy. And as you guys can imagine, and some of you probably have experienced this, it's going to be really hard to dive into a conversation around our inner world and, self exploration and things like that if we don't feel safe. So it's super, super important to create a safe environment, which I will get into a little bit later on. There are also overlapping relationship dynamics in therapy and in an astrology reading. In both settings, someone is coming to you seeking clarity and guidance. There is typically, I would say, like in astrology readings, like I said, I haven't been giving them for too long, but probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, there's something going on that someone is uneasy with. There's something going on in someone's world that they're like, oh gosh, like this is really challenging and I'm not sure how to navigate this, or I don't know how to make sense of this. I need a little bit of guidance from a third party. So that's something that they both have in common. Like I mentioned before, in both settings, someone is coming in with their own established narratives, worldviews, and honestly, their own set of traumas. And we're going to talk about trauma a little later on. There's not a terrible amount of, like trauma triggers in this presentation. I tried to keep it not super, super heavy. And I just wanted to mention that here. But the reality of life is that we all have experienced some sort of trauma. And so when we really sink down into ourselves as an astrologer and we say, okay, I have my own stuff, and this person coming here has their own stuff too. And I'm not going to pretend like I know what their stuff is. And I'm not going to like pick and poke and prod. I'm just going to hold the energy that I'm aware that someone is coming in with their own stuff. And I think that really helps create empathy and compassion. You don't have to name it explicitly, just kind of know it and hold that energy. In both settings, there are expectations and stigmas. And by this, I mean, like, as a therapist and an astrologer, I think that some people, maybe not all, but some people are going to us for the answers. they're hoping, they could be hoping, okay, that we have the answers and we'll know exactly what this person should do and we will just make all their pain go away. And unfortunately, that's not the case. It's also not super effective to like give someone an answer because one, we don't know them, or whatever, but I also think it's way more effective to have someone come to their own conclusion. But that is a stigma of it. Like someone's coming in and they're like, okay, I have all of this stuff going on. I'm coming to you. Please give me an answer. And with astrologers in particular, there can be this stigma of like the fortune teller, which I'm sure many of you guys have experienced with possible friends or family who learn that you're into astrology. It's like, ooh, like you know everything about me by looking at the chart. And so I think I'm going into this a little bit later, but there are ways to kind of nip that in the bud without being like, hey, just so you know, I don't have all the answers. Like we don't have to explicitly say that, but there's ways to kind of hold the energy. And what we really want to do is empower them to come up with the answers anyway. So I think in that art, kind of like reflecting back and empowering the client, we address that stigma. Also, you can explicitly mention it if you want to. There's literally no right or wrong way. If you feel that someone's like, come on, like you have the answers or you can predict the future or whatever it is, you can explicitly say like you can't, in a very loving way, and there's no harm in that either. And lastly, the overlapping dynamic in both settings is power dynamics. And we really have to think about this because, like I was mentioning before, someone is coming in probably already a little like, ooh, like either, anxiety provoked, I guess, or they have questions or they're down on their luck. So they're coming in with that energy, but they're also coming in and you have a chart that explicitly tells you, the astrologer, about this other person. That can feel very like, ooh, okay, like this person knows me in a way, but I have no idea who they are. And that's another thing is that like as astrologers, we're not talking about ourselves. You might share like, oh, in my experience with this transit, blah, 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 blah. But you're not talking about yourself, and the other person is spending the time telling you about their inner world and their experiences. That feels very vulnerable, and that triggers a power dynamic. There's nothing wrong with it, like a power dynamic, but we have to kind of like keep in our mind that this is the reality of the situation. Another part of the power dynamic is that like we have astrology knowledge and they might not, especially if they've never had a reading or something like that before. It, excuse me, with one person having like the knowledge and the skills and the other person perhaps not having the knowledge and the skills around a specific topic, that also creates a power dynamic. And lastly is there's an exchange of money. And I feel like anytime there's money involved, there is, kind of like an underlying power thing involved. So how do we work with this? I kind of already mentioned this just now, is that we can't necessarily do anything about it. I think that if we spend time being like, okay, like how do I make sure there's no power dynamic, and how do I make sure like we are on an even playing field and I don't intimidate this person and whatever, it's just going to come off weird. And I think that we can just acknowledge and hold the awareness and sensitivity around the idea that it exists and it's okay. And also like in having the power, quote unquote, in this way, we are responsible for creating this safe environment. And when we create a safe environment, through, our tone, through our energy, through the words that we use, that power dynamic is hardly honestly hardly noticeable. And when we cultivate and foster a feeling of empowerment on the client's behalf throughout the whole reading, that helps in a way. And also, like, I'm sure you guys have experienced this before, whether within yourself or witnessing someone else, but we can hold a position of power. I don't know why I'm doing this, but like hold a position of power. And that's very different than like asserting dominance, is saying that like I am the all knowing and I know you better than you and da da da. Not that you guys would ever say that, but some sometimes we can get carried away and we can have that energy. Our egos kind of come in and take over. Excuse the dog barking. But I'm sure we've all seen, I mean, you guys have probably seen in movies, like someone in a position of power can just very peacefully like hold that power. And if you can hold the power and have confidence in your reading, that comes off to the other person and that creates a felt sense of safety. Like, oh, this person knows what they're doing and this person like respects me. I think that you guys know what I'm talking about there. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Okay, this is Spider-Man. Because with great power comes great responsibilities, and which I love. And so what are your responsibilities as a astrologer? So your responsibilities are to acknowledge your limitations and define your wheelhouse. What types of readings are you comfortable offering right now? Is it only birth charts? Are you comfortable working with transits? Are you comfortable doing solar return readings? Just kind of, you have to know this kind of within yourself. Also, like, what topics are you more comfortable talking about and what topics are you not? But your responsibility is to like acknowledge maybe what acknowledge what you don't know and name what you do know. It's also another one of your responsibilities is to just simply interpret the symbols to the best of your knowledge and your ability. You are the astrologer. You are looking at the birth chart. You're interpreting symbols. You're speaking a language. You're really translating a language that's difficult for some people to understand. You're also there to address what the person is coming to you for and provide some clarity and direction around that. I definitely would encourage all of you, and I know that Adam does the same thing, but like encourage you to ask the client why they're there, and hear them and listen to them and see what topics they're interested in, because it could be easy. Well, it's actually kind of difficult sometimes, but it can be easy to be like, oh, I see this, like, let's go here because I'm familiar with this. But it's our responsibility to address what the person is coming in for. It's also our responsibility to be compassionate, respectful, and non-judgmental. Now, what our responsibilities are not as an astrologer, they are not to heal someone. They are not to take away someone's pain. We are not responsible for that. We're not responsible. We don't have to make sure somebody leaves feeling positive and happy. Like, we don't want them to leave confused or like feeling god awful. But I think like if we are driven by like, I really want this person to leave happy and I want to like fix and things like that, I get that impulse 100%. But I think we lose a lot of the soul and a lot of the realness if we're going into it thinking that that's our responsibility. And also that's like a lot for you to hold if that were the case. It's also not our responsibility to give advice. We can point to certain things, we can give archetypal explanations of things, but it's not our job to give someone advice what to do. Again, they're coming in with a whole life that they've lived, and we're only sitting with them for X amount of time. So we really shouldn't really be giving like explicit advice. With that being said, if you are some sort of other healer, like say you're an herbalist or a therapist and you make that known or whatever it is, you can ask if they want like a small piece of advice or something like that and then go from there. But I stray away from giving some advice. And then lastly, our responsibility is not to change the way someone is making meaning out of their experience, or viewing their world. We don't have to say things like, well, if you look at it this way, we really have to work with how they are viewing the world. We have to meet them where they're at. Okay. So the next part of this is it's really important to know yourself. I love the know thyself quote. I think that it is an incredible honor to be a human on this earth and to be conscious and have the ability to reflect and to know ourselves. And this is actually such an important part of an astrology reading. It doesn't happen like in front of the client or whatever it is, but it happens behind the scenes. And I think that it's very important to know yourself as a human being and an astrologer. When I was in grad school for therapy, well, to become a therapist, I guess, they stressed this like no other, self-care and knowing yourself. Because I think that we can navigate the variables that are the human experience so much better when we have an anchor of ourselves to come back to. So how do we know ourselves as a human being? This looks like having it could look like, I'm not going to say this is the way to do it. But it could look like having a reflective practice. This is meditation, this is journaling, this is going to therapy yourself, or some sort of counseling or something like that. But just having a reflective practice and really knowing and getting to know your inner world, getting to know your soul through, wow, I had this difficult time with this today. I wonder what was present here. Let me get in tune with my emotions. Let me get in tune with my psyche. Another thing that's super important as an astrologer and as a human being is to acknowledge your biases. And this is, your biases astrologically look like, actually, this is super important. So I don't want to just trail off. I want to stress it. But I would really sit with yourself and say, okay, are there certain planets that I don't particularly have the best relationship with? Or in my chart, they show up in a kind of, detrimental way. So I have like a little bit of a fear response or an aversion to a certain planet. You're going to want to make note of that. Because if we don't make note of that, and if we don't just acknowledge it in general, let alone work with it, that fear and how you feel about a certain planet or a certain house or something or a certain transit, that's going to come across in our reading. So we really want to be just intentional about naming our biases. Also, let's be honest, we all have certain, biases just out in the world and towards other humans. I'm trying to think of the word. It's, oh my God. I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of. But, if you had a certain experience, like with, let's say, like a different gender, or something like that, then that might again come off in your reading. So just check yourself. We all have biases. We're all human beings, and it's important to acknowledge them, because when we do acknowledge them, we can really start like implementing the change and start, grounding ourselves into like a more compassionate realm. If that makes sense. Also, on like kind of the same wavelength, knowing your triggers about certain topics, like if there is a person sitting in front of you and they are talking about their issues with their mother or their issues with their boss or in a certain type of relationship, maybe a codependent relationship or something like that, and that triggers something in you because you had a similar experience, we have to be aware that that's going to happen. We are going to get triggered. I don't love using that word because I feel like it's used so much, but we are going to get triggered. So it's important to just know what yours are and be able to kind of like do the work around how do I sit with this and how do I kind of regulate my nervous system when something comes up. And lastly is knowing how you process information and knowing what your communication style is. This will help you prepare for readings, and it will just ground you down into your style as a therapist. Now, knowing yourself as an astrologer, we talked about the bias thing, but also like you want to ask yourself some questions. You want to ask yourself, what is your orientation, your style, what are your beliefs, and what is your philosophy? Kind of around astrology, like, am I a Hellenistic astrologer? Am I a modern astrologer? Am I kind of a little bit of both? Am I more psychologically oriented, or is it spiritually, or do I specifically want to help people with just their relationships? All of these things can help kind of like create that anchor for you. Is like, this is the kind of astrologer that I am. And we can always kind of come back to that. And that creates such a grounding energy. It also helps the client. It also helps the client be like, I know exactly what I'm getting into with this astrologer because they told me what their style is. You also want to ask yourself how you see your role as an astrologer. Are you there just to interpret and reflect back? Or are you more of like a consultation counselor type of astrologer? Do you see yourself as a spiritual guide? Those kind of things. And then what do you think is valuable about astrology? Why do you love astrology so much? Why do you think that people should know astrology? Or what do you think astrology can do for people? Again, if you journal about that, if you really reflect on that, you are going to, I had a supervisor once tell me, like, in therapy, she told me, I feel like you're trying to come up with like a formula. And she said something like, if a client shows up with this, then I can use this formula. And if a client shows up with this, then I can use this formula. She's like, what I really think you should do is have a worldview that you can use to just direct any conversation, no matter what the person is coming up in with. And I think you knowing how you feel about astrology is that worldview. Okay, so now that you know yourself, now we want to just talk about how to prepare for a reading. And I think a lot of you guys probably have your rituals and things that you do. So this looks different for everyone. I just put down a few basic things. So we want to be able to create a container. A lot of us do this work like virtually, but we can still create a container. Like right now, you guys are like locked and loaded, like on the screen right now. I'm here. I can't see you guys, but there is this energetic container that is like with us right now. So in order to do that, you kind of want to just like, well, this is me. You kind of want to like cleanse your space, sage, Palo Santo, whatever you use. Make sure it doesn't look cluttered. I think that that's just kind of like a little like counseling thing, is that if it's like really noisy in the background, that can cause a lot of distractions for people. So just make sure it looks kind of neutral. And then we really want to access self energy. So what self energy means is that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with internal family systems, but it's a type of therapy, and it basically just focuses on multiplicity of ourselves and the fact that we all have different parts of ourselves. And within that scope of therapy, there is a concept, I guess, of the capital S self energy. And this means just pure, this is how I interpret it, it's just like pure self energy. Like the part of me that wants to make sure I get the reading right, the part of me that wants to help someone, the part of me that's worried or nervous, all of those parts are outside of me, and I am just coming into my heart center. taking a deep breath, grounding myself, and just coming up as a human being. It's really important to kind of just center our energy before we meet someone else's energy. Um, there's something else I wanted to say with that, but I forget what it is. But I think you guys understand. Um, Also, remind yourself again what your roles and responsibilities are. Not here to heal, not here to give advice, not here to make sure everyone leaves happy. Um, and I think it's really important to see yourself as a conduit. This is true for both therapy and astrology. I was actually really surprised how many of my colleagues talk about being a conduit in therapy. But it's definitely applicable for astrology too, is that once we start the reading, like we are, I don't know how woo-woo people are, but we are like channels. We are trying to conduit, we're trying to conduct, I guess, messages and energy from something bigger than ourselves through using the birth chart and talking to someone else. Demetra George in one of her books talks about like having little like representations of this to remind you that you're a conduit throughout the process. And I think the one that sticks out to me is lighting a candle, having that candle represent the conduitness that you are. And then lastly, something else is just like, this is a practical tip, is just have nearby resources and little notes and maybe like a little mantra or something like that that can help ground you down throughout the reading. I'm gonna check on my time here. Okay. Saffron, we're going till noon, right?
It's 2 hours altogether, so
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can get very long-winded. So, okay, now here we are. We're greeting the client. This stage is actually more impactful than we might think. This is the stage where we set the tone, we model a safe environment, we are defining our roles, we're demonstrating respect and sensitivity right off the bat, and we are encouraging collaboration in this process. My style of astrology is not just simply talking at someone, but this also feels very weird for me, but it's not talking at someone, it's working with someone and asking questions and asking them what they think. And I think that that's probably best practice because it creates a feeling of empowerment, and the reading is about them, so if we can get them included, I think that that's very good. So here again, we're creating connection in a safe environment. We're coming in with that grounded energy. We're using like a soft tone. We might be trying to talk more intentionally. We're being mindful of the relationship dynamics that we discussed before, those power dynamics, reminding ourselves that this person is a human and they're coming in with their own stuff. And we are opening up the conversation and asking about astrological experience. I do this in therapy too. When someone first comes to me, I ask them if they've ever had therapy and what was that like for them. This just helps. It kind of like creates that container a little bit, kind of like brings it in a little bit because it's like, okay, hi, we're here. We're doing the like, oh, what's the weather where you live? And then we're doing the, okay, we're here for astrology. And we put it back on them and ask them what their experience is. That gets them to use their voice a little bit, gets them to open up that throat chakra and feel kind of a little bit more comfortable. And this is a good segue because it helps you inform how your reading looks. Like how much jargon you use, or if you just give a basic sun, moon, rising because they're a beginner. So then we want to define our roles and cover our expectations of the reading. So you just kind of talk briefly about your approach and your style. I think that can feel really like nerve-wracking to meet an astrologer because it's like, okay, again, like I don't know you. So when an astrologer starts talking about themselves in the sense of like, this is my style, just like brings everything down again. And it creates that expectation of like, okay, this is what I'm in for. Like, this is the astrologer's perspective, and this is what I can expect. Kind of helps build a sense of trust with like a little bit of transparency there. You talk about how you view your role. This will indirectly address those stigmas of like, I'm going to tell you your future. That's probably not how you view your role. And then maybe just a little bit about what a session looks like. You know, going through, I'm going to ask you about yourself. I'm going to take you through a basic sun, moon, rising thing, and then we will get into some of your questions. We have X amount of time. That again helps create that container and might address any anxieties about the unknown. Because again, you're in a very vulnerable spot. So if we can make more factors known, I think that that helps a lot of people. All right, so we're still greeting the client here. And here in this phase, we're demonstrating, again, respect, sensitivity, and empowerment. I love this little photo because it just screams empowerment to me. You always want to get someone's permission if you're recording something, especially if you're going to like use it again, which you probably shouldn't. But just let someone know that you're going to record it and that you won't use it again anywhere else. Then here we can kind of say like, hey, there's an invitation for collaboration. This chart reading is about you, and I want you to get out of it, you know, basically what you came in here for. So I'm going to invite you to interrupt me, you know, if something doesn't sit right with you, or if there's something that you want to add. And please ask me questions. And I say something like, you can never offend me. You know, like if you say, nope, that's not it, you're not offending me at all. You're actually helping me a little bit more. And really stress that, like, yes, while I am the expert of astrology, you are the expert of your life. That to me is a very, very important part of this. It's also a very important part of therapy. You know, like, yeah, I might have the skills or techniques to help you out, but you are the expert of your life. They call that a humanistic approach. And then, you know, I tell everyone, well, this is what I say to everyone. I tell everyone that there could be some sensitive topics that come up. I frame it that way, in the way of like, I tell everyone, because if you just say it, if you're like, so there could be some sensitive topics that come up, and they might think like, oh God, like what are they seeing right off the bat? So when you say, I tell everyone this, there could be some sensitive topics, that kind of like alleviates that anxiety. And then I let people know that they always have permission to like, nope, I don't want to go there. They have permission to decline something. And I let them know that I'm going to make it hopefully not feel weird, and that I'm going to honor and respect that. Yeah. Lastly, I think when you're greeting the client, just be mindful and use inclusive language. Never assume someone's gender or, you know, obviously sexual orientation. And while you're doing the reading, you know, never assume someone has a basic, what do they call that? What's the like nuclear family, you know? I use words like mother figure, father figure, parental figure, something like that, instead of mom and dad. So those are the big ones. I'm sure that there's more too, but those are the big ones. Okay. And then lastly, here in the stage of greeting the client, we want to ask them to share a little bit about themselves, in the sense of what are they like coming here for? What themes are they hoping to get addressed? Yeah, we just kind of like hand it over to them and hear their intentions. This brings us to our listening skills. So some of these are very basic. Most of them are very basic. So I don't mean to like, I hope I don't sound like condescending in any of this. But even if you're already doing this and you know this, like, I think it's like a helpful refresher. And also listening and comprehension skills obviously go throughout the whole entire session, not just in the phase where the client is telling us about themselves. So there's something called active listening, and this is literally just basic listening skills. Also, I love this dog. He's so cute. So basic listening skills are, we just want to have appropriate body language. We want to demonstrate to people that we are listening. You know, we might kind of like lean in a little bit more at times. We might match their body language at times. You guys probably do this intuitively. We obviously want to make sure we're making eye contact with someone. We also like want to make sure that we're not interpreting something and like planning on what we're going to say, like while someone is talking. This happens naturally. You know, like someone says something and we're like, ooh, like I have something to say about that. I would just check yourself there and just like remember that, okay, like I hear that, I'm going to put that aside and I'm just going to continue to engage here. Sometimes when we jump to like, ooh, I want to say something, did I say interpreting? I meant interrupting. So sometimes when we jump and we want to interrupt or we're like planning on what we're going to say, we miss the mark a little bit. So just kind of like take a step back. And sometimes what I do in therapy, just to like symbolize this, I do a lot of like telehealth, is that I'll just kind of like open my hands, not on the screen because that's weird, but I'll hold my hands down by my side and just like open my hands. And that to me symbolizes that I'm just holding space for what's coming up. Also, obviously, don't impose your opinions on someone. They're not really coming here for your personal opinion. And then ask follow-up questions. That is very demonstrative of active listening. So then there's something called empathic listening. This is a little bit different. So this is listening to someone through the lens of putting yourself in their shoes. Really have that mindset. I know it can be so hard when we're doing readings because we're like listening to them, we're looking at the chart, we're trying to figure out like where to go. But in the sense of making someone feel seen and heard, we really want to like try to put ourselves in their shoes and open up our heart a little bit. We want to respond in a way that shows someone that maybe we've been there or that we understand. This can look like just nodding. This can look like putting a hand on your heart. This can look like kind of like matching their facial expressions. You know, try to, I wouldn't like hide your facial expressions and just be like stone face all the time, obviously. But if someone is saying something that is pretty like dramatic or drastic, maybe try to refrain from like the shock and the horror on your face. Just kind of like come down to a neutral tone there. You want to listen with an open mind and allow the person to have their experience and not try to give solutions. We all know what it feels like when we are going to someone and we're like, man, like dealing with this hard thing. And someone's like, well, have you tried this? Like, it just like does it misses the mark. So we want to just allow someone to have their experience. I think that this is going to be a video, like a quick video, but also it might not load. We're going to skip the video because it basically just like reiterated what I said. But Brene Brown has a really good video on YouTube about the difference between sympathy and empathy. And basically she says like sympathy is being like, oh man, I feel so bad for you. And empathy is like, I hear you. And like, I'm here with you kind of thing. So if you want to check it out, Brene Brown, sympathy and empathy. Okay, so back to our listening and comprehension skills. We want to ask what's called clarifying questions. These are questions that you ask because you don't really understand something or you want more information about something. This also demonstrates that like you're curious and you're there and you're trying to fully understand what someone is trying to say. This looks like, I heard you say blank. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean? Can also look like, well, what does that look like for you? Because you might hear someone say something and in your head that triggers like, oh yeah, like I've been through that. but we don't know exactly what it looks like for them unless they're telling us. So I think that those two sentences are very helpful. Also, don't be afraid to be like, oh, I'm sorry, like I'm just not following you right now. Can you explain that again, perhaps? There's nothing wrong with saying like, oh, like I missed it or I'm not getting it. I don't think that that's going to leave someone feeling invalidated. Then there are reflective listening skills. Reflective listening is listening for what is beneath the surface and reflecting the tone or emotions that you're picking up on back on the client. This is super important because it helps with the connection between you guys, and it also helps for your astrological interpretation. So this looks like, what I'm hearing is that even though it was extremely painful at the time, it shaped your life in this way. They probably didn't say it exactly like that, but when someone is telling you something and you hear that, articulating that back in that way really helps someone feel heard and seen. It also kind of like clarifies the archetype that we're working with. Saying things like, so I'm also hearing that there's a sense of relief here, or it sounds like you're wondering what the next step is. I know that this sounds like very like textbooky, but I think I wanted to share these sentences with you, not because you should use the exact sentences, but so you get a feel of what the difference between I'm just listening and reflecting back to you word for word, and then I'm able to reflect back to you the emotion that I'm hearing you say. There's also, this is an art, to be able to listen to what the client is not saying. It's like the client's saying something, but you're hearing it on a deeper level. So you're listening for the emotions, you're listening for the narratives, and you're listening for the themes. Usually, if you're an astrologer, you're probably very in tune with archetypes. That's what you're listening for. If someone's talking about like an aggressive situation or whatever, you're hearing Mars, like you're hearing Mars everywhere. Maybe you're looking at the chart to kind of like look into it a little bit. But what we really want to do is like, if someone's recalling a certain situation, say at work or something like that, we really want to listen to like, oh, this person was feeling powerless, or oh, this person was feeling taken advantage of. And we want to note that in our minds. You can also reflect it if you want. Also, just a tip, like don't take what someone is saying at face value. By this, I mean, if someone says something like, I'm just doomed in relationships, they never work. Don't just take that as like, yep, this person's doomed in relationships. I would look at that as, you can ask a question, well, why is it that you feel that you're doomed in relationships? Because once we connect to that feeling, I think that the astrological interpretation is going to get a lot easier. We might not see, oh, doomed in relationships. I guess we could, but I think that it's more effective to be like, well, why is this person's soul? Why is this person's karma? Why is this person experiencing the feeling of feeling doomed? You guys know what I mean? And we also want to listen for parts. I use the word parts, but also listen for like planets and things like that. Okay, so interpreting symbols and relaying information. So this is more of like communication skills now. First, of course, we want to meet a client where they're at. If they are a beginner, we don't want to use super jargony language. That feels really weird, and the client will just end up feeling lost, and that power dynamic increases a little bit when we do that. We want to be attuned to the person's like conscious awareness. What I mean by that is that some people, when they're talking, you're gonna get a sense of like their beliefs. Are they more spiritual? Are they talking about things in a karmic way? Are they talking about things from an ego perspective, from a relational perspective, things like that, from an inner world, outer world? You just want to gauge what that person's like, again, conscious awareness is, and you want to match that, because if they're not getting into spirituality and karma and things like that, of course you can touch on it. But if they just want to know about relationships and we're talking about like, I don't know, going down some sort of spiritual path or, you know, some enlightenment stuff or whatever, we might miss the mark. Also, on a practical level, we want to match their pace and their tone and their energy to a certain extent. You know, if we can tell that they're taking some time to like process the information and they're talking a little slower, asking follow-up questions, we want to slow down a little bit. If they're kind of like right with us, okay, we can match that. And obviously, like I said before, we want to address their questions that they're coming in with. I love this photo so much. I don't know how I found it. It's great. I love it. So we are, as an astrologer and a therapist, really, but we are trying to create an embodied experience. So just like we're listening for the experience of a person beneath the surface, what we were talking about before with the, well, it feels like I had something taken away from me or something like that. We're also trying to call forth a felt sense of truth. We want this person to connect to their chart on an emotional level. If we can point out something in their chart, like an archetype that triggers like, oh yes, like this archetype is alive in this way in my life, boom, they're connected. They have a buy-in, first of all, which is great. But they're connected and they're feeling seen and they're feeling heard. I'm going to keep saying seen and heard over and over again because I think that that's very important. And we do this in two ways. One is through presenting multiple possibilities to a client, and two is we're using archetypal images and stories. I'm going to break those two things down in a second here. So when we use possibilities over definitive statements, well, that's the title. So when we do this, basically what that looks like is like, I'm going to give this placement at its worst, this placement at its best, and this is something kind of in the middle. When we give like possibilities, instead of, well, this is what this placement means, it allows the person again to make that emotional connection. So if we're trying to like get it right or hit the nail on the head with like an interpretation, it's most likely more about you at that point. You just want to get it right rather than the client. And again, this can trigger that power dynamic. Whereas if we leave room for the exploration and interpretation of both the client and the astrologer, now the client is connecting to the oracle on their own, if that makes sense. They're making those connections. Just a few examples. Instead of saying, when I see X, this typically means X, try saying this planetary combination could present itself in a few different ways. Then you give a few different ways. Or instead of saying, I'm seeing that you have a difficult relationship with your siblings, say, one way this could manifest is through the experience of tension or dynamic energy brought forth through sibling relationships. It could also indicate that a sibling of yours has undergone some challenges of their own. That feels very different than you have a challenging relationship with your siblings. And also ask questions. You're not the fortune teller. You're not supposed to know it all. Again, they are the expert of their life. So ask those questions. What is coming up for you when I say this? Does that trigger anything? It could not. Don't take offense to it. You know, what's another way that that placement can manifest, and present that. I don't know if you guys are going to get these slides, but these are just like a couple different like word choices that I think are helpful for us to use to like make suggestions and things. So words like perhaps, has the potential to, sometimes but not always, possibility. You guys get it. This is just another example. And so say we have someone with a sun conjunct Saturn. We can say it in three different ways. We can say this can feel like your self-expression is being limited by forces either within yourself or perhaps people in your environment. In that statement alone, there's a lot of room for wiggle room there. Saturn Sun can also show up as being met with roadblocks or checkpoints along your path forward. Again, this is very broad. Keep it broad. You know, this is archetypal and broad. This will help them come to the conclusion on their own. We can also say that the Saturn's conjunct Sun can represent the tendencies or a personality of a father-like and or authority figure. Okay, I love these next couple slides because in my practice as a therapist, I use like imagery and active imagination a lot and archetypes. So this is fun for me. So we're talking about how to elicit like an emotional connection from someone. And one is presenting those wide range of possibilities. Two is just kind of like throwing out archetypal images. So this little archetypal image of this superhero girl over here, like that to me says like, yeah, like even though I'm small, I can do it. Or even though, you know, people don't think I can, I can. It might be something different to you. When you see this picture, you might think of something completely different. But that's the point, you know? So coming up with an archetypal image like a little girl on top of a building wearing a cape. That could trigger, well, yeah, I'm a woman and I'm a CEO. Same image could trigger, yeah, I'm a nurse and I help people for a living. It could also trigger, I'm a mom. And to me, that's my superpower, being a mom. I used all women examples because it's a little girl. But you see what I'm saying there? When you present images, one person might be like, oh, that's me being a mom. And you talk more about that. Another person's like, oh, that's my career. And you can talk more about that. I think images are super, super, super helpful. I feel like I sound like a broken record here. So I'm just going to skip it. You guys kind of get the point. So we also, I'm going to drink some water. We don't want to underestimate the power of validation. I love Avatar so much. There is something super powerful about someone sitting with you and saying, I understand. And like, I get it. I see you. That in itself is like, oh, I think that you guys probably all have those relationships where someone just gets you, or someone can reflect something back to you in such like a clear way that's like, oh my God, yes. So don't underestimate that power of validation. I think that sometimes astrologers can be like, well, it sounds like I'm just reflecting back to them what they already know. Like, slow down too, because that is powerful. Obviously, we want to give someone something more, but don't underestimate that wisdom, that magic. So we can have validation in two different ways. We can have validation through conversation, which is kind of what I was just talking about, is having your experience named by someone else and reflected back to you in a compassionate and empathic way. That's one form of validation, just human to human. Another form, this is specific with astrology, is spiritually validating. There is such a profound feeling that comes from a stranger, a literal stranger, naming your experience using something like a birth chart. It can really help people feel like, whoa, this experience that I had is so much more than just me. This is karmic. This is divine. This too belongs here. That's very powerful. Now, on the other hand, sometimes validation, while it is powerful, sometimes it feels like it's not enough. You know, a client might be feeling super doomed or stuck or hopeless or anxious. And here are a couple of things that you can do. One, from an astrological standpoint, you can just reflect back to them that there are multiple expressions of each placement in their chart and of each archetype in themselves. You can also say that like the same placement isn't going to show up in the same way over and over and over again. This could also bring you into a conversation about karma and working with karma and like I don't want to say freeing yourself of karma, you know, but like changing it, I guess. Um, but you can go the route of like multiplicity, and just let someone know that like, no, things can change and things can mean different things at different points. Like I have Saturn conjunct Venus in my chart, and that Saturn conjunct Venus looked very, very different when I was a kid, very different in my 20s, and very different now. Um, from another astrological standpoint, look at the supports in the chart. Someone's feeling stuck, hopeless, or anxious. We obviously want to help them. We don't want to say, well, yeah, but if you look over here, like this isn't terrible. You don't really want to say it like that, but you can say like, well, let's take a look at the chart together. And let's see if there's some planets that really are trying to support this placement in this situation, this karma, but might not have the tools as to how to do that. They might not have the tools. The energy might not be conscious in the client yet. Or they might be super debilitated, so they're just struggling. But telling a client you're going to look elsewhere to see if there's support and then go from there is helpful, to help a client feel not so stuck. Then from a human standpoint, you can even engage in a little bit of conversation around like, okay, well, what you can say, you can share your beliefs and philosophies around struggle and hardship. And you can even ask them, well, in your experience, you know, how do you make sense of pain? How do you move through struggle and hardship? And you'll be able to hear them say, obviously, how they do that if they respond. But you might hear things like, you know what, it sucked at the time, but on the other side of it, like, I'm really glad it happened. You know, obviously, there are things that people don't say, I'm really glad that happened. But you might be able to hear, like, oh, okay. Actually, it's more important not for you to hear this, but for them to be like, oh, yeah, like, okay, I have gone through something like this before, and it maybe taught me something, or just on the other side of that pain, there was a healing power. I like to talk about alchemy when I talk about like transforming pain and things like that, but that's just my jam. You can also talk about fate and free will. I think bringing up the topic of free will when someone's like, okay, yeah, but like, am I just going to be like this forever? You know, because we get that as astrologers. And to address that question, it's like, okay, well, what do you think about free will? What do you think about the ability for you to actively engage with the karma in your chart? You can go down that route a little bit. And this creates a sense of empowerment. And it also puts the onus back on the client. Again, you don't want to say, well, this is how I think that your chart's going to help you move through the pain. The chart's not going to help you move through the pain. They're going to move through the pain through whatever modalities is effective for them. And we want to make sure that they know that. This is just like a little something that I came up with. Is I can probably see myself saying this to people. I probably never said it exactly like this, but something like, perhaps the archetypes that create tension, anxiety, etc., are the characters inside of us that didn't get the space to express themselves naturally in the past due to certain circumstances. And those circumstances have changed now. So these characters are learning their new roles, and we can help them through reflection and through having a relationship with them. Okay, so there's such thing as also accidental invalidation. I'm being mindful of the time. We might go a little bit over 12 o'clock. I know we have until 12:30, but these next couple slides are important. So accidental invalidation, that looks like, you know, just something is off, like you miss an opportunity to extend compassion and to like let a person know that they're seen. That could be like you're moving too quickly through something, like hopefully I'm not doing right now. Or you skip over something that was probably really important for people. Like you may have heard a lot before, especially if you're a therapist and an astrologer, you may have heard like, yep, I've heard this trauma before. Yep, I've heard this relationship dynamic before, whatever, but they may never have said it out loud before. So always remember that. Also, you can accidentally invalidate someone by just focusing on the positives of their chart. I get it. Like, we don't want to like bring up like all the nasty and all like the terrible or whatever. Also, we don't know, you know, but there's a tendency to be like, oh, I just want to focus on the positives because that feels good and hopefully this person leaves happy. If we do that, we can accidentally invalidate someone because their experience on the other side of that lived chart can be like, no, it hasn't been easy and it's not happy and it's not super positive all the time. But if an astrologer is looking at the chart and they're only saying it's positive, ooh, like that leads to it's called cognitive dissonance, but that leads to like a disconnection and perhaps a feeling of shame and confusion. Well, why did I have all this hardship if they say that everything should be great? Am I not living up to my karmic potential? You know, I guess maybe it'll get better, but I don't really see that happening. You can see how it forms kind of questions like that. So, as much as we might not want to talk about the negative stuff, it's important that we do. And which brings me to navigating difficult conversations. So I want to talk about how to actively bring up something that could be potentially challenging. It's very similar to if we get the Tower card in a reading and we're like, oh God, that looks terrible. But there's so much more to that Tower card than just people falling out of a burning building. You know, maybe it was burning and they were in there and falling out is like the best thing that they could do. You know what I mean? One is if you are taking time before you meet with a client, or even while you're meeting with a client, and you see something that you get a ping of like, ooh, that looks challenging. It's probably your intuition. Again, like know your triggers and things like that. And if you kind of have that wrapped away, it's probably your intuition. And if you see it and you feel it, they probably feel it and experience it. So just remember that. Go off of their inquiries or like where the chart reading is kind of going. We don't want to just like bring something up to bring something up because we think it'd be interesting to see if you're right. Definitely don't do that. Go off their inquiries. If they're wondering about a struggle, a challenge, a pattern that they have that they don't want, go towards it. Use the chart for support and personify the planets. You know, so by this, what I mean is instead of saying something like, well, I can see here that you have potentially struggled with da da da. You see how I use the word, I see here that you blah, blah, blah. We could say, well, Venus in this place doesn't feel super comfortable. They don't feel like they have enough resources. They're trying to call the host of this place and they're not answering. So they're feeling a little lost and lost. We'll go with that. So that might look like this in your life. How might Venus feeling lost because she's in a certain place, say Venus is in Virgo or something like that, she might feel this way. And personifying the personifying the planets, doing that, talking about them, I feel like helps take off the like, well, you probably like that. You guys get the energy. It also helps the person have a relationship with the planet. So that's like one super, super helpful thing to do if you're actively talking about a challenging topic is to use the chart for support, use the planets and their places and aspects. Talk about them as little characters. I think it's really helpful. And then of course, like we don't want to assume the worst, but we definitely want to consider it. So if you see something and it looks like, okay, what's coming up in my mind is like abuse, some sort of abuse. We want to give multiple manifestations. We don't want to just say you probably experienced abuse. Like that's not helpful. And we want to think archetypally. This could look like this. Well, I think prepping for talking about something like this looks like this. I'll clarify that. We want to use the first word that we think of and break it down. So we're getting a little like Mercury energy in here. So if I think, ooh, I see this, I don't know, for some reason I'm getting a feeling of abuse of some sort. For you, start with that word and break it down into archetypal experiences. So abuse, you can frame it in the sense of this planet could feel powerless. Could feel like maybe at one point there was not a lot of space for self-expression. Or in your life, is there a domineering or aggressive authority figure? This planet probably experienced some hardship, through you, in and through you. Or you may, with that one, I would say like, perhaps you experience some hardship around this. Because if we say like the planet experienced hardship, like that could feel like, well, screw that planet, like I did, And also like, it sounds like you really had to rise out of a dark, dark place. Those are all kind of different ways to talk about abuse without saying the word abuse. And then same for like health issues. We could say challenging relationship with body and health, or, the body and your spirit or mind might seem to be on different pages. Tell me a little bit more. We want to always invite room for conversation. Super helpful technique, I think. I like. All right, so how do we hold space for when clients talk about trauma and traumatic experiences? Well, one is that we got to kind of do that inner work. When someone starts talking about this kind of stuff, difficult stuff, we want to connect back to that like knowing thyself thing that we talked about way in the beginning. We want to know our biases and we want to know our responsibilities. Again, we don't have to just take this pain away from someone, nor is that effective. Knowing that like, okay, this is triggering me, but this isn't about me right now. This is about them. Also, a little therapy note, if you do feel triggered during a session, just take note of it, put it aside, and make sure you come back to that triggered part later on. Maybe journal about it or something. Notice your initial reaction. Remember the hands opening thing? Create space. Let it go. Open your heart up to what this person is telling you. And remember, you're just a conduit. You're just a conduit. They're saying something to you. You might be getting intuitive nudges, just kind of trust. Which leads me to also trusting the client. Trust the client in that they've done this work. They've probably had therapy. This isn't the first time they're thinking about this traumatic. Well, maybe they haven't had therapy, but like this isn't the first time that they're articulating this traumatic experience. Trust that they can handle it because they can. And just remember that people are incredibly resilient. And maybe even go back to like, well, what's your experience with pain and hardship? And remember that as someone's talking. It can be so like, we can get into the like, oh God, I gotta save, or like, oh God, like I have to like help or whatever, but just kind of take a step back and trust a little bit. That also creates a sense of safety of like, I've got this. I can hold this for this person. It's the worst feeling when we're talking about something hard and someone's like, you can tell that someone's freaking out because it's like, oh God, like they can't handle this. Like, I don't want to share this with someone. And then they just kind of shut down. So we want to be open. So that's your inner work. Now responding to someone, it's everything that we've already talked about, guys. We want to actively listen. These people are doing it very well. We want to express compassionate body language. We want to empathically reflect. It sounds like blank. What I'm hearing is this. We also want to listen for authentic resilience and strength. And we want to add this to our reflection back to them. We don't want to listen for just the positives and focus on that. That's not what we're doing. We want to see if there is strength and resilience already present in what the client is saying to us. So we want to listen for words or words similar to these. I'm hearing like creativity in the process of how they've dealt with something. Maybe extremely resourceful. You had to do what you had to do. You seem incredibly innovative and incredibly creative, and you're able to work your way out of situations where it might be, difficult for others. Something like that. Words like, I'm hearing that you're intuitive, or it sounds like you felt empowered, or sounds like you're connecting to a survivor kind of trait. Or it sounds like you're dedicated or you're determined. Listening for those traits are helpful to like take the hardship and the trauma and the challenges and then kind of like, okay, like what is the karma doing here? You know, why is this happening? Oh, it's bringing out this like empowered sense in this person. We're always working with someone's karma. We're always trying to help someone recognize their karma at play. Then this is a little jargony again. Well, not like jargony, but like specific, I guess. But if a client becomes emotional, if the client starts to kind of like break down and cry, happens all the time. I say something a little like this. Especially if they're saying like, oh God, like I'm sorry, like, you know, because people get uncomfortable crying in front of other people. You can say like, this is a safe place. Like, we welcome all the full range of the human experience, full range of emotions. All are welcome here. And also, I'm a big and also person. And also, I understand that it can feel very vulnerable and very overwhelming sometimes. This will normalize and validate what they're going through. And you can say, so while I am more than happy to stay here and work through this and see what we can navigate, how we can navigate through this using the chart, I also want to remind you what we talked about in the beginning, that we can pivot at any time. You don't want to continue, we don't have to, but I'm here if you want to. So again, you're holding that place of power. You're holding that energy, and you're also giving them an out if they want to. They're not trapped. Remember that I keep doing this. We're simply holding space. Again, it's not our responsibility to take away someone's pain, and nor is that effective. As difficult as it is to hear something sometimes or go through it on your own, connecting to that level of like karmicness will help you kind of like ground down to like, this isn't my responsibility. They will come out on the other side of this as they move through their pain at their own pace. Now, if someone's asking you for like your advice or like, oh God, please help me with this traumatic thing or whatever it is, you can, it's fair. It's totally fair. Okay. There's no judgment here. But you can explicitly restate your role in a compassionate way and say like, you know, I can look at the chart and we can see what supports are here again. We can see how else this energy is like manifesting, or yeah, probably not that, but see the supports, see what the karmic potential is. But, you know, helping you specifically navigate through this is probably out of my scope of practice. You can also recommend things. You know, like I've found, or I know others have found, that therapy or energy healing, or if it's physical, you know, acupuncture, Reiki, things like that, massage, are very helpful to navigate these things. You know, don't be afraid. It's not like offensive if you like recommend something like that, especially if you do it in like a kind and caring way. And also you can share that like, as much as I want to take this pain away from you, I do believe that like it's gonna work best and move through you if it comes from you. And I want to help you, and I want to give you maybe some things I can see in the chart to help you navigate this. And maybe you can also, if you're a reflective person, you know, tell someone like, I think like a reflective practice and an insight oriented practice is a good start. That's if it's not like, yeah, that. Okay, and we're getting to the end here, guys. I hope that everyone's still engaged. So lastly is like, what happens when a client just like goes and goes and goes and goes into like their trauma or their struggle or whatever it is, and we're like not even using the chart at this time, and we're just like talking, and it feels a little bit more like therapy. We of course want to honor and acknowledge what's coming up for them, and that kind of looks like what we were talking about before with this. Okay. So we want to honor and acknowledge what's coming up. We also want to give options. Like, this sounds very important to you. I want to make sure I can like use the chart to kind of like reflect back to you, or to help provide some clarity and guidance. So like do that, kind of like bring it back to the chart, because it's like, this sounds important and this sounds like a key point of your karma. Let's look at the chart. You know, like you can just say it kind of like that, bring it back to the chart. If you've only gotten to like one of their questions and they had others and you're not getting there, you can name that too. Like we can absolutely stay with this and use the chart, or we can move forward to another one of your questions if it seems just as important. Kind of give them the option, empower them, they can choose. If they decide to move forward and just leave a topic and move forward, it can feel a little jarring at times. But well, you can say one is okay, we can keep with this one, you know, and like provide clarity and relief and support and things like that, kind of what I was saying. Or jump to a new topic, which again can seem jarring, but if a client says, no, I want to jump, energy reset, jump. But I think always going back to the chart is helpful. Okay, ending a session, very basic. You know, we want to give kind of like a 15-minute warning. Do you have any questions right now? Do you need any clarifications? Did we not address something? We want to provide summary and a recap of themes. And if this is what you want to do with your practice, you can offer a brief follow-up. You know, if anything comes up for you, if you have any like basic questions, I can address them through email. You don't have to offer that. And then just kind of like open your heart up again. You know, feel the energy that was just created with the two of you guys. And really sit with what just came up. A lot probably came up. You know, it's important to not like rush through the end, to give that warning, and allow them to speak anything else if they have it. After a reading, especially if you're doing telehealth, well, not really, I guess in both situations, and not telehealth, I meant like remote. After a reading, you close down, you check in with yourself. You did it. We did the reading. We worked with the human. We did all the astrology things. We want to kind of cut the energetic tie, however that might work for you. Some people just literally do this. I wash my hands afterwards and just kind of like brush it away. Want to notice our energy, what came up for us, maybe address those triggers if they came up, not right away, but just eventually. Celebrate your wins. Hell yeah, I did it. That felt so good. Oh, I really helped that person. Do it. You know, that's why we're here. Check in with that inner critic. Oh God, I could have done that better. And it could get, I don't know, if yours is anything like mine, it could just go. So check in with that. Tell it to chill out for a sec. Come back. Take a moment. If you are working from home, just kind of cleanse, ground, whatever, before you go out and visit with your family or anyone else you live with. Last slide. Self-care. Super important for doing any type of healing work. This work is not easy. It's fun. It's difficult. It's also hard to sit with someone. So learn your own rituals and flows. Know your boundaries. How many clients do I want to see in a day? How much time am I going to spend prepping? That's a big one for me. How much time do I want my sessions to be? Am I gonna charge for this? How much money am I going to charge? There's a typo in follow-up, but am I going to allow a follow-up? Kind of what I was saying before. Like, do I want the client to like be in contact with me? Do I want the client to have my personal phone number? Do I want to stick with just Instagram or email or my website? Kind of determine the access to you. Burnout is a thing. You're working with energy. You're working with the soul. It's great. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's heavy sometimes. So just kind of check in with yourself always. Am I feeling burned out? Am I feeling drained? It can be really helpful to reconnect with your why. Why am I doing this? Truly, not like why am I doing this, but more of like, what's my reason why? That can help fuel the soul up again. Again, work with those triggers. And lastly, find a community. You know, I think that I really got a community through Nightlight. I have a lot of Nightlight students follow me on Instagram, which is really cool and fun. And I think that a lot of people are here right now, which thank you. But just a community, you know, astrology is such like a unique thing. And it can feel kind of lonely when this is our world. We start to see everything through the archetypes and astrology. And if most people don't understand that, it can feel lonely. So having a community is very helpful. Key takeaways here. I'm just going to list through them. I'm going to read through them. There's power in connection, validation, and witnessing. Always just listen with your heart. I know, trust me, I know we want to listen with our mind, but listen with your heart. Remain open and curious. Trust your intuition. Again, you are the conduit. You are the conduit and you're an intuitive being. Trust your intuition. That's like a huge part of all this. And trust your client and honor their journey. We did it. Thank you guys. I really, really thank you all so much.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for sticking around. I'm really happy to be joined by my wife Ashley, who is an herbalist. Hi, Ashley.
Hey.
And yeah, I'm really excited to be helping Ashley promote her upcoming program, which is something that you actually began teaching many years ago, this herbal apprenticeship program. I think it was 2011 or 12 that it got started, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been over 10 years I've been offering this course, and yeah, it's my favorite thing to teach.
Yeah. And just to be clear, because some people on my channel, most people know you because you pop on here or there. We talk about herbs and astrology. There's an attraction in our marriage and an attraction in the subject matter that is old. Like we've been together for 14 years in our relationship going on, and we've always had a fascination with each other's areas of expertise, and we've done lots of things to marry them together over the years, in addition to literally getting married. And and actually, herbalists and astrologers have married the subjects of herbs and planets together for thousands of years as well. Now, your program is focused on uh, herbalism. It's not an astrology course, but there is certainly a lot of overlap in terms of the energetics and the spiritual approach to herbalism that you take. And so I was hoping that we could start off just by telling people a little bit about the program. You're coming to this after taking a little bit of time on maternity leave. Our kids were not yet in school. Now they are. You're coming back to work. This is really exciting. The new program launches at the end of April. I'm going to put it up on the screen so people can see it. You can find it at skyhouseherbs.com. Enrollment is open now. The course begins. You go under courses, Herbal Foundations Apprenticeship at the end of April. Tell us about it.
Well, this course, I guess my goal in redesigning the apprenticeship course that I've been teaching for 10 years is to make it even more personal and to allow people to study the material, digest it at their own pace. So what it's going to be is a combination of kind of three main parts. The first one is the recorded material. So there's going to be modules that will be released and people can listen to them as they have time. The second part are live classes where we will meet live on Zoom and talk about the module, I'll answer questions, I'll give even more information about it. And then the third part is the sacred plant pairings. And so I've always taught the herbal portion, like the plant diets, one at a time, but this year I'm going to do it in pairs because I think you can learn a lot by comparing and contrasting herbs. So for every module, you'll have 2 herbs to study and you'll get a little cheat sheet about them before you start the module. And then you'll have an opportunity to work with those 2 plants and blend them and keep them separate and just really work with them closely. Because my goal is that I want people to be able to find information that they can really use in their own lives, maybe with clients, whether they have a professional herbal practice or maybe they're a therapist in a different field, that they'll know these plants so that they can work with them really comfortably.
I love the different modules that you have just so we can preview them for people. Module 1 is Vitalism and the Heart of Herbalism. Module 2, Building Your Home Apothecary. They're so diverse. I love Module 3 is my favorite, Plant Spirit Medicine. Energetics and chemistry. You have such a holistic approach. It's what I've always loved about your teaching. You'll teach about the doctrine of signatures. You'll talk to people about how to communicate with plants, how to think of them as teachers that are living beings that have personalities that aren't just phytochemistry or whatever, but you will also teach phytochemistry. And I think that you have this really well-rounded way of helping people be intelligent about the plants, about the body, about the systems of the body, but also not afraid to use energetic systems, not afraid to take something from the kinds of energetics that ancient mystics were working with, whether that's the elements or whether that's, some of the overlay with things like Ayurveda, Chinese medicine. You take what's useful on a symbolic and energetic plane and on a personal connection level with the plants, and you marry it to really smart scientific research. I think that that's rare. You don't see that a lot.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, to me, it's all language. They're just different languages that we talk about the same thing. And I think the more diverse our languages as herbalists, the more we can reach more people. And that's kind of my goal. Like, I want everyone to like be able to identify plants, use plants. So we need to diversify the languages we speak so we can talk with our physicians, so we can talk with a therapist, we can talk with a mystic, right? We can talk with children. And we have a language that everyone can use.
You talk in the program, in your modules, you have stuff on digestive and gut health. You have stuff on detoxification, colds and flus, and dealing with virus seasons. You talk about tissue states, and you're talking about how to give things to your kids for helping them maybe at times even relax before bed at night. We use a lot of different things with our kids. I love this that you have called this a I'm going to find the phrase where you use, and I'm going to mess it up. A community herbalist. What is a community herbalist, so that people can understand that definition? Because sometimes people might look at a course like this and think, gosh, unless I go to an accredited university for 8 years and learn all about chemistry, I have no right or business suggesting herbs to people or using herbs. That's just not true. And that's not the history of how folk herbal medicine has been used or taught. So what do you mean when you say community herbalist?
I think you said it perfectly. This is the people's medicine, and our grandmothers and great grandparents used plants as medicine. There's nothing actually that like hard about the practice of herbal medicine. It's just getting to know the plants and getting to know the times when they're most useful. I really envision that this course, people can take it and yes, use it for themselves, number one, because I think a lot changes when we have the personal experience, and then using it in your family, whether that's just, maybe making a tea for your dog, or, if you have kids, or maybe you just have a partner, maybe you have plants you can use, and we'll talk about taking care of a garden, but using it for yourself, for whoever's immediately around you, and then taking it beyond that, because it's likely that at some point you're going to be talking with someone. They're going to say, oh, I've got this digestion thing and I've tried this and this. And they might say, hey, you're studying herbs. Is there anything that you would recommend? And you know what? You'll probably have a few ideas. And that, you never know how one way that you help someone out there in the world might trickle and then help others and more people. So I think through the self-knowledge and studying this knowledge in your own body, it'll naturally, it's like, impossible for it not to spread out and start to affect the broader community.
Yeah, I think that's really important. This is also for that reason, because we have a vision. I mean, you guys know through my Kickstarter, you guys helped us build a community herbal medicine garden that Ashley's been hosting free and donation-based events out of, that the donations go right back into the garden and just growing the medicine that we then find ways of harvesting and giving to other people, or letting other people come and harvest. We have a vision, we always have, back to the days when we had our yoga studio in Maryland. We have always had a vision of making this sacred knowledge accessible to people. And that is both there in this program in terms of the way you're framing what it means to be an herbalist. It might mean that you're a professional and you see clients, and you could continue beyond this program developing the skills to do that. This would certainly set you up for success. You could also go forward and be someone who uses what you know with friends and family and yourself. And that's an incredible set of tools to have. The program's also very accessible from both a programming standpoint and a price standpoint. I'm going to take you back over and show everybody the programs. The modules are pre-recorded, but then you meet outside of the modules for discussion, community, Q&A, and sort of development and integration. So people can attend those live. If they miss those integration sessions, they can also watch the replays of those. So
absolutely, yeah.
Anyone could take this at their own rate, as slowly or as quickly as you wanted to, really soak it in, or blaze through it. And then we can certainly, beyond this program, as Ashley perhaps makes more advanced programs available as she's easing back in out of maternity leave, can help you with further development or recommend you to many other wonderful programs where you could continue your studies. we want this to be accessible. We want community herbalism to be, as simple as being able to show a friend a couple of yoga stretches. We should be able to show each other herbs, and just, hey, this is a helpful herb to use. Also, accessibility price-wise, we have an early bird enrollment, and we have standard enrollment. And then we have tuition level 1 assistance and tuition assistance level 2, which break out the affordable tuition into different levels of affordability. And you can kind of identify where you're at if you're someone who wants to take this program, but needs to work within your means and not hurt yourself doing it. And then for those who can pay, we ask that you use standard or early bird enrollment. And that's the same thing I do for all my astrology programs. So we try to keep it super, super accessible. The Herbal Apprenticeship program starts April 24th. I know Ashley's super excited to be getting back into teaching too. I also would like to offer Ashley just a chance to tell everyone a little bit about, before we end here this interview, tell everyone maybe a little bit about your own background, who you studied with, what your influences are, and just anything else you want to say before we cap it off.
Ooh, okay. Well, I think, I started off as a kid playing in the woods, mixing perfumes and potions. And then I went on to study environmental science, where I studied organic chemistry and restoring native wetlands. And really from an environmental perspective, that's how I got into herbalism. And then after, I realized after working on the restoration piece and joining a lot of earth advocacy groups, that the problem's not with the earth, but with the people not understanding the value of the earth. So then I started going into holistic medicine. I graduated from University of North Carolina, Asheville, with a degree in interdisciplinary studies. And I went on to get my that was my undergrad. And then I got my master's from the Maryland University of Integrative Health. It was then called Tai Sophia. But my teachers there, I had such a great blend of teachers, really scientific minds, like Simon Mills from the UK and Kevin Spellman, who is like a chemistry genius, who's also an Ayurvedic practitioner, studied with Dr. Vasant Lad. Matthew Prisco, medicine maker from Galen's Way out in California. So I had a really wonderful, diverse variety of teachers in that 3-year full-time master's level program. And then after that, I went on to study with Matthew Wood pretty intensively because I liked his energetics. I liked the way he spoke about the plants and his personal experience working with low dose, drop dose medicine. And he has had amazing he's done such amazing work herbally with just using that method. And I've got a lot of herbalists in my
David
basket.
Duke comes to mind. And
Jim Duke.
Or Jim Duke, sorry.
Jim Duke, Margie Flint, Rosemary Gladstar is like, I've only done one herb walk with her, but it was amazing. So, I have shelves of herbal books and people who I just adore.
Yeah.
And I just feel really grateful that I've had that blend of the science and the energetic herbalism and the traditional herbalist perspective as well. And I try my best to blend them together and to give everyone a really diverse yet integrated herbal studying experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You get that. That is exactly what you'll get if you sign up for Ashley's program, which I encourage you to do. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, you won't regret it. It's a fantastic course with someone I absolutely love, obviously, but also like a really, truly fantastic human being and teacher of plant medicine. And if you want to learn more about her, see her work, get to know her a little bit, check out her YouTube channel, Skyhouse Herbs, where she publishes weekly on plant medicine, plant energetics, and also on Instagram, which is Skyhouse Herbs. So the apprenticeship program starts April 24th. I wanted to get Ashley on, brag about her program, turn you guys on to it. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm sure that we're going to see some people from the Nightlight astrology world getting introduced to you and all of your magic.
I would love that. Thank you.
All right. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.